Buddha was originally a Hindu and a prince. So how did a Hindu prince become Buddha, and how did Buddhism actually come about? Buddha was a Hindu prince called Siddhartha. He was born in Lumbini in Nepal. He was born in an era when major social and religious changes were happening. At the time, the dominant religion in India was Hinduism, but a lot of thinkers of the time had begun to question its validity and the authority of the Vedas, as well as the practices of the priests. Critics claimed the religion wasn't meeting the needs of the people. The Vedas were said to have been received directly from the universe and couldn't be questioned, but the scriptures were all written in Sanskrit, a language that people couldn't understand, so they were interpreted by priests to encourage acceptance of one's place in life, no matter how difficult or impoverished, while they themselves continued to live well from the temple donations. People started to question the entire construct of Hinduism. Hinduism taught that there was a supreme being who had not only created the universe but was the universe itself. Brahman established the divine order and delivered the Vedas to enable human beings to participate in this order with understanding. It was taught that the human soul was immortal and the goal of life was to perform one's karma in accordance with one's dharma, in order to break free from the cycle of rebirth and death and attain union with the oathed soul. The soul would be incarnated in the physical bodies multiple times over and over until one finally attained liberation. The Hindu priests of the time defended the faith, but as new ideas began to circulate, more people questioned whether the order was divine at all, when all it offered was endless rounds of suffering. So Siddhartha grew up in this time, but wasn't aware of any of it. His mother died within a week of his birth, and a prophecy was given that he would become either a powerful king or a great spiritual leader. His father feared that he would become the latter if he was exposed to the suffering of the world, and so he protected him from seeing or experiencing anything unpleasant for the first 29 years of his life. During this time, Siddhartha lived among the luxuries of the palace. He was married, had a son, and lacked for nothing as the apparent heir of his father. But one day he slipped through his father's defences and saw what Buddhists now refer to as the four signs: a rich man, a sick man, a dead man, and a religious man. He realised that he too could become sick, would grow old, would die, and would lose everything he loved. He saw that the life he was living guaranteed his suffering, and that life was essentially defined by suffering for want or loss. He understood that everyone he loved, every fine object, all of his grand clothes, horses, jewels, all would one day be lost to him. They could be lost to him at any time, on any day, because he was subject to age, illness, and death, just like everyone else. This was unbearable to him, but he noticed the religious man, just as doomed as anyone, seemed at peace, and when Siddhartha asked him why, he was told that pursuing the path of spiritual reflection, detachment, and recognising the world and its trappings as an illusion enabled the man to not be concerned with loss, as he had already given everything away. Siddhartha knew his father would never allow him to follow this path, and on top of that, he had a wife and a son that he was responsible for, who would also try to stop him. At the same time though, the thought of accepting a life he knew would ultimately lose and suffer was unbearable. One night, after looking at all the precious objects he was attached to and his sleeping wife and son, he walked out of the palace, left his fine clothes, put on robes, and departed for the woods. Siddhartha then sought out teachers to help him achieve the attainment of nothingness, but this did nothing to free him from suffering. He was then taught how to suppress his desires and attain a state of neither conscious nor unconscious, but this did not satisfy him as it didn't address the problem of suffering. He then tried extreme self-discipline, eating only a grain of rice a day, but still he couldn't find what he was looking for. He left and was found in the woods by a milkmaid, who mistakes him for a tree spirit because he is so emaciated, and offered him some rice and milk. The milk revives him, and he ends his extreme self-discipline and goes to a nearby village where he seats himself on a bed of grass beneath a Bodhi tree and vows to remain there until he understands the meaning of living without suffering. In a deep meditative state, he contemplated his life and experiences. He thought about the nature of suffering and fully recognised that its power came from attachment. Finally, in a moment of illumination, he understood that suffering was caused by the human instance on permanent states, being in a world of impermanence. Everything one was, everything one thought one owned, Everything one wanted to gain was in a constant state of flux. One suffered because one was ignorant of the fact that life itself was change, and one could cease suffering by recognising that. Attachment to anything in the belief that it would last was a serious error which only could trap one in an endless cycle of craving, striving, rebirth and death. His illumination was complete, and Siddhartha was now the Buddha, the enlightened one. He then developed his Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths were that life is suffering, the cause of suffering is craving, the end of suffering comes with an end of craving, and there is a path which leads one away from the craving and suffering. The Four Truths direct one towards the Eightfold Path, which serves as a guide to live one's life without the kind of attachment that guarantees suffering. You live with the right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness and right concentration. These are the whole basis of Buddhism. In recognising the Four Noble Truths and following the Eightfold Path, one will still experience loss, feel pain, no disappointment, but it will not be the same as the experience of dukkha, which translates as suffering. So that's how Buddhism came about from a Hindu prince. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, share and subscribe. Thank you!